Millennial Woes. Happy Lamster.
Hello. Hold on a second. There we go. I've just shared the link. Um,
Great.
hello,
You
Luke,
inspired this
and
whole operation. So I should say thank you. Or possibly I should say, what have you done to me?
well, thank you for inviting me on. Um, yeah, I suppose that you're referring to Millennial, which
Correct.
yeah is obviously it's become a bit of an institution, a bit of a tradition for us, and that's lovely. It started. I mean, I didn't. You never know whether something is going to endure when you do it the first time, and for me, it was just a way to. I'd done a set of Hangouts because in those days we called them Hangouts because it was Google Hangouts. This was in
Yes, I remember those days. Yeah.
yeah, it was in 2015, and I'd done a set for the national election in the May, and those were the first Hangouts I'd ever done, and people liked them. And so at Christmas, I thought, well, we should do some more, and so I did. And the way it played out was it was just going to be open hangouts, just like the ones in May had been, when anyone could join.
Hmm.
It just seems incredible now that you would
Yeah.
do that. Um, and so I did that. But what happened was that the first one was gate crashed by Sargon of Akkad,
Hmm.
and that laid down a sort of notion that each one of them should have a prominent guest. So the next day, I think it was Greg Johnson. The next day, it was Richard Spencer. The next day, it was Jared Taylor. I can't remember the order now. So each one of them was an open hangout, but it had a guest. Now, and it was entirely spontaneous. Um, and it was very messy. I mean, these streams would go on for like 4 hours and 6 hours. I mean, ridiculous. I hadn't realized at that point that the best streams are you need discipline. You need to have a structure, and any more than three people is probably going to be a mess.
I think nobody knew in those days, did they? There's this kind of
No.
brand new knowledge to the human race of how do you do live streaming. And turns out one of the lessons is planning, structure, discipline, limitations. All of these things breed quality.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It's stuff that because people tend to think, well, just have loads of people on, and the more the merrier, and surely. But it's like it's the thing about the too many cooks spoil the broth. But
mm,
especially when it's people who aren't accustomed to live streaming, and so they treat it
mm,
as or they aren't accustomed to content creation. So what they do is they treat it as just a chat among friends. Now, that is fine for what it is, but it's a different thing from content creation. If you want it, it's a different thing from creating something that you want to bear rewatching. And I mean, I think that with those streams where it's just people chatting and uh, shooting the shit, as it were, they are of historical interest because you see how people were talking in 2015.
mm.
What it's like a record of how our movement was in that moment in time. Um, but it's not disciplined, and so that was the first year, and I didn't repeat the format. Um, I realized sometime because then in 2016 I did loads of live streams with my friends Reactionary Expat and Pale Hominid, among others, many others. And but those were the regular. I did a monthly one with them, and I came to realize that through doing that okay, it really has to be disciplined. If you just wing it and hope for the best, it's going to be it's probably going to be a disaster, and people might enjoy it at the time, but it won't be something that they ever rewatch, and it won't be something that they recommend. They'll enjoy it just as background stuff, but it won't have weight or focus or import. So, in order to create something that does have those qualities, you need to be much more disciplined. And so, when it came to the next Christmas 2016, I decided to make it much more pared back. There were more streams. I think the first year there had been 7. I think it was a week. and there had been 7. But so the next one there were, I think, 16 or something like that. And but each one of them was a one-to-one conversation with a prominent person, and that was the format laid down then, and every
Yeah,
year
you found the format
since.
very quickly then.
Yeah, yeah. It was really just common sense. It was keep it simple,
Yes.
and yeah. There you go.
Yeah, you gave me some tips when I first approached you and said I'm thinking of doing a bit of an unofficial spin-off of Millennial called Lambster, and people still aren't happy with the name, but I'm sticking with it. And you very kindly gave me some advice, some wisdom that you'd picked up from doing it, and what you've just mentioned was one of them is. You can't just have a sort of unstructured thing. You said for introducing the guest, don't let them go on for more than 20 to 30 seconds.
Some guests will go on for like 10 minutes telling you their life story, and you just want them to say who they are and roughly what they do, so that you can then get on to the actual conversation.
The audience doesn't want to hear you about you or your day or the technical problems, which is why I'm mysteriously in a suit despite not having been on previous streams, and that's just going to go unexplained. That will be deep mystery to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, you could briefly say it, obviously, but just don't go on about. Well, and today I was at Tesco, and so the checkout girl was really rude
my toe,
to me,
and then I couldn't find a plaster.
Because that's got nothing to do with the actual. This is just obviously.
I think at the time when live streams first became an option and a thing people would occasionally watch, they were viewed as very much a secondary form of content versus... Certainly for me, if I subscribed to a channel, I would watch the edited videos and skip all of the live streams for about a year. And then I eventually started dipping my toe into watching live streams. At this point, it's pretty rare for me to watch a video that isn't a live stream. And I wonder if we found a formula that means we can actually produce something in a live stream that is impossible to replicate in an edited video. There's a certain honesty in the spontaneity. As long as you can keep it on rails, the live stream really gives you something.
It does. And I mean, what I found was that I started to get very paranoid and sort of precious about the proper videos on my channel. I started to really worry that they weren't up to the standard that I'd set, and could they be better? Could this one be better? I started getting really paranoid about it, and the analysis paralysis. But oddly, with live streams, I didn't get that at all, because there's no point trying for perfection or expecting that of yourself with a live stream, because you cannot possibly manage it. There are going to be mistakes. There are going to be quite embarrassing mistakes here and there. Technical errors. You might say the wrong thing, leading to an embarrassing situation, whatever. Or there might be just... Well, whatever it is, that it's never going to be perfect. Like right there, where I couldn't think of a third example.
that kind of thing. You always want 3 examples. If you were writing, you'd have come up with 3.
Yeah,
if it took you all afternoon.
Yeah, so that's a good example right there of how it's going to be a bit rough around the edges. But
so you're such a professional broadcaster that even your mistakes are actually just created to illustrate a point.
No, that was genuine. But I think I turned it around. No, this is the point, that live streaming is like this. Everyone understands it and expects it. And so you don't... There's almost no point being precious about it. All you can do is do the proper preparations. And if you've done that, then that's it. You do the preparations and then you relax, oddly enough, with live streaming.
The format that seems to have taken off in the largest sector, the bit of YouTube that gets the most views, gaming, is you stream for 8 hours on Twitch, and then it gets edited down to like 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes,
Yeah.
by a team of like full-time editors.
Well, that's the
So
thing. You would need a team of editors to do that, because otherwise you'd be wading through 8 hours of footage. I mean, that's never going to. I'm never going to do that. That's awful.
no, all I'm saying is, in if we're imagining where will this medium be in the future, if we imagine this community continuing to grow and improve in quality, I don't know if that's a dark future, but that might be it. Is longer live streams and then people taking the time to edit it down. But
It might well be. There's also a sort of adjunct to this, is as I alluded to earlier, that people enjoy. Hold on a second. There's traffic outside. Twat on a motorbike, which again is part of the rough and ready joy of live streams.
part of the joy, yes.
The What was I've actually forgotten what I was going to say. Oh yeah, so the sort of anarchic nature of live streams is also, it lends itself to an experience where there might be for example, I did a long live stream with Sargon back in the day, which was, I think, over 4 hours long. And that's ridiculous. I mean, you would never make a video that was 4 hours long. But it functions as a sort of grueling experience of two men disagreeing with each other. And
Yes,
I think
I've
people
watched-
enjoy it for that reason.
I've watched one or two of those 12-hour marathon reviews of the The Force Awakens or
Oh God, probably less grueling than the
Mauler
film
and
itself.
his friends. That's true. It was therapy for me at that point.
Yeah, that's the only one I've seen of the new Star Wars films, and it just
Yeah.
made no impression on me whatsoever. I just thought it was rubbish.
Yeah, you've kind of summed up 12 hours worth of content in a sentence there.
Yeah. There are some things that don't deserve to be spent, 12 hours on, and that's just depressing. Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Okay, so there's a couple of interesting things that I've been doing for the first time in running year one of Lamster, and I'm interested to kind of
one tip that I should have given you is,
oh yeah,
while as you go, you'll learn things and you'll realize that this doesn't work, that would work better. You should always make notes. I mean, even now with Millennial, like I wrote like an A4 length list of things to do, things to remember next year. I did that even last December. It's like constantly making little refinements here and there.
Yes. I'd be fascinated to like get an insight into all of your little processes and such, and to some degree, you just pick a method and go for it. So I've been using a lot of Google Docs. Even my schedule is a Google Doc, which has the amusing side effect that people. So it's a public Google Doc. So everybody watching could at this point have their cursors appear up on the screen if they wanted to, because this is how people have known what's coming up. So here's one anonymous quagga is in here, as well as me. So here we are. I have had streams sort of every evening during the week, and then today, for the mysterious reasons that we're not going to go into, I was busy all afternoon, so I pre-recorded one.
He was abducted by aliens.
Shh, you weren't supposed to tell me.
He didn't want to tell anyone, but I've said it.
And then tomorrow, I'm just doing back to back. So one of the things that's been tricky is trying to gather information about when people are free, and then juggle it into a program. And then as you approach, people start giving you new requirements. Oh, sorry, I'm not free then. Can you move it later? Well, then do I have to talk to these other people? So how do you approach setting up the schedule for Millennial?
It would be an absolute nightmare had I not written a program. I wrote a piece of software to juggle all of that. And I wrote that, I think, in 2017.
Wow.
Was the first year I used that, because there were hold on a minute. I'll tell you how many there were that year. I think it was 66 that year, I believe. And so
Wow.
that would have been just a nightmare to do all of that. So what I did was I wrote a page on my website for booking, and then my software gets the results of that from people going there and choosing slots, but which ones they can do and which one they would prefer, their ideal slot. So my software gets those results and then juggles them and allocates slots. And then obviously I do some manual stuff as well. So, and if there's someone who is very high priority, like they can't do, there aren't many slots they could do, then they get priority in the software. So the software takes care of all that. That was first written in 2017. And each year I've developed it further to do more things, to take care of more things. Last year, the innovation was that it wrote a lot. It automatically posted a lot of things to Telegram, so to keep people updated. And so yeah, every year that software has got bigger, and that's integral to Millennial. I mean, no one will ever know it except me. And it's not of any use, and
It would be of use to almost nobody.
No one
except
at
me.
all. Exactly. Well,
I could be your first customer.
well, it would be inscrutable, though. That's the thing. But yeah, that software is crucial for Millennial, and it also creates, like last year, it generated the animations, the adverts and stuff. So it's really been packed full of things at this stage that it does, and that's Millennial. Without that, it would just be a nightmare. You would need a team of people doing stuff.
So you've put some hypothetical person out of work by writing.
Well, I had to. It was my economic resources made it a necessity. So I couldn't. I had to lay off that Team Indian call center workers and do it this way instead.
What about discussing with guests in advance what you're going to talk about? Because I've not been on Millennial, and I've not asked anybody else about their experiences with it. So what's your take? How much prep do you do, and do you ask people to?
It's really different for every guest, because some guests, that they will just be able to carry a conversation for an hour, and it will be fine. It doesn't matter. Because they're just very good talkers. They're very good communicators. Other people, especially if they're an unknown quantity, because they might not have done a live stream before, you want to have something really laid down. And the best thing with them is to have a set of points that either they come up with or I come up with that we will cover during the stream. And mostly it's something like that, but it differs for every guest, and it's oddly something that just seems to come together on Millennial. It's not, and sometimes with some guests, I'll just say to them before we go on air, so is there anything you would like to talk about in particular, or should we just talk about the year that's gone by? And it just seems to work out. There have been a few cases where it definitely didn't work out, and I thought, should have put more planning into that. But I didn't know in advance. But most of the time, it works out fine.
Yeah, I found the streams extremely various. It's surprised me how different one is from another.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if it's just the guest and the guest's personality entirely driving the difference. I suppose it would be interesting to compare me with the same person the next year. And if those two streams were identical, then you could probably assume it was all down to the guest. But there's a topic, there's the way that we've each interacted previously.
Yeah, and there's also how tired you are.
Yeah,
that's a thing as well.
Poor old Distributus is last on the program, and I don't know if I'll be coherent at that point.
Well, one thing, as I said, is to come up with a list of points that you want to cover or topics that you want to cover. That's if you've got that, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, if you, as I say, with some people, it's not necessary to do this, but I think with most people, it's a good idea to have like 5 or 6 things that you will ask them or that you want to bring up with them, and then it will probably be okay. I mean, unless they show up drunk or on drugs or dreadfully depressed or something, then it's going to be all right, I think.
We could go extra meta, and I could show you the notes that I have for this stream.
That's like the DVD extras appearing in the film itself.
Thank you for inspiring me. Dash, what have you done to me? What do you think of my program? How began? How much variety between guests? How much blame self? So my next question is, if a stream goes well, how much do you feel like that was your doing? And if a stream goes badly, do you feel like, oh, it was my fault, I asked the wrong questions, I didn't do enough prep?
Yeah, that definitely happened in the early years of Millennial. At this point, I feel like I've got proficient enough at it to avoid huge screw ups.
Yeah.
And it's really, you have to watch each guest, you have to watch some of their content beforehand in order to get to grips with what kind of person they are. Are they going to need lots of prodding, or will they be able to just carry the conversation themselves? That kind of, you want to know in advance, because with Millennial there are people who will contact me asking to be on who I've not heard of before. So I always make a point, because otherwise you would just be saying hello on the stream, and that'd be your first contact with the person, your first experience with the person.
Question 1: who are you?
Yeah, and I did do that in 2017. That happened a few times, and I would never let that happen nowadays, because it's asking for trouble. It's asking for disaster. I'm trying to think of it's because you asked me, do I? Obviously, I blame myself. If a stream goes badly, yeah, of course, I feel like I will go through the sort of agonizing, oh, was that my fault? Could I have done that better? Could I have prevented that mess up? And usually the answer is yes, you could, if you'd been more careful. But why would you have been more careful? You know, why? You have to just forgive yourself and realize, well, in the thick of it, you're doing loads of different live streams. You can't sort of, what's the term, micromanage each one of them.
Yeah.
And I don't think the audience would expect that of me anyway. I think that they understand that live streaming is inherently a bit chaotic, and that's part of its appeal.
One of your tips was, if you think of a question while the other person is talking, write it down.
Yes.
While you were just talking, I thought of a question and I wrote it down.
That's probably the best tip that I could give anyone for interviewing. Is always have the next thing ready that you're going to, because when the guest will stop talking, even if they're a motor mouth, they will eventually stop talking, and usually very abruptly. And
That's true.
It's a thing that they just stop, and then you oh shit, right.
And I'm over here like with Twitter open or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. So you have to be ready for when they stop. So yeah, go on.
What I wrote down was, been surprised, your reaction different. Sometimes I read my notes and I'm like, I have no idea what I meant there. I think what I was meaning with this question was, have you ever been surprised that you thought a stream went well and it was poorly received, or you thought a stream was awful and then everybody's saying it's the best stream that they've ever listened to?
Yes.
Recommending it.
Usually the latter. It's usually that I think it went badly, but a large number of people are saying, no, it was really good, it was fine. That happens a lot, actually. I mean, I'm always very self-critical. So
right.
I can't think of an example where... I can think of streams where I thought it went really well and other people... Like the Praise of Folly one last year was very short, but it was very short because I thought, this is great. Like in the space of 40 minutes, we've covered an incredible amount of material. So I just ended it there because I needed a break before the next stream. So, but I actually thought it's right to end it here because, keep it short and sweet. But other people didn't seem to have the same reaction to it. They wanted it to go on much longer. And I can understand why, because Praise of Folly is a very interesting guy. He's a very good speaker. But I thought, no, it's fine as it is. In fact, it's very good as it is. And it would be a shame to now extend it and make it a big bloated thing where it's great as a wee just 40-minute stream. So that was one example where I thought it had gone very well, and other people didn't seem to agree with me about that. But usually it's that I think it hasn't gone very well, but the audience are happy with it. And I mean, I can't think of examples off the top of my head, but yeah, that does happen.
I wonder if you're actually just ahead of the curve, that short streams like the one you mentioned with Praise of Folly, there's an art to it. I think audiences don't always know what they want. They think that they want a longer stream, but if they listen to a long stream and only the first 45 minutes was that good, they, in retrospect, regret. So it's difficult processing feedback in that sense. You mentioned that you take notes, I guess, right after it finishes, and then also in preparation, ready for the next. When you're coming towards the next set of Millennial. How rigorous is that process? Do you have? Do you just sit down with a notepad and pen and whatever comes to mind, or are there specific things you're doing, like summarizing interesting comments people have left, or notes that you made whilst you were streaming?
It's a single text file that I have, and I think it's just called ideas.txt, or things to remember. And I have a special folder called Millennial in which that file is stored. And and that's another thing. So whenever I come up with an idea, I immediately record it in that file so that it won't matter if I forget it, because it's recorded. So when I come to do Millennial, it will be there. This idea will be there. I think it's always very important to record every idea you have for whatever project, because you will probably forget it if you don't write it down. Or there's a danger that you'll forget it. Another thing with Millennial is I realized 2 years ago that there were loads of things that you can, like in the preparation for it, there are lots of steps that are necessary each year, and there are things that I could forget to do. So I decided, I thought it'd be a good idea to have a file and it's literally called Things to Do Each Year. And so it's like it's like a written down formulaic process, a procedure of how to arrange Millennial. So it goes scheduling. That's the first section. Then the second section is preparation, and then the third section is during it, and then the final section is after it is all over. So there are things that I need to remember to do at each of these stages, and like create the trailer, design the merchandise, do a Twitter banner, animated stickers for Telegram, set up the NFT auction. I'll probably do an NFT every year from now on. Test the email system, because you never know if it's Google have changed something, so you need to update your own software. Create the avatar, because each Millennial has its own avatar. And this year, in the scheduling section, I've written, under no circumstances allow yourself to go beyond the format after Christmas Eve. This is a mistake. This is always a mistake. The momentum is gone and your energy is gone. So that's me convincing. That's me convincing myself, don't be tempted to do this, because every year I am tempted. Because every year people ask to appear, and so I've got to extend the schedule beyond Christmas. And every year I do it, I think, this was a mistake. I'm exhausted. So that's our note to myself: don't do it.
Do you think you'll follow your own good advice?
Hopefully, I guess we'll
We'll,
find out.
we'll make
we'll
you stick
just have
to it.
we'll just have to wait and see.
What do you think are the key skills of being a good interviewer?
Knowing when to intervene and when not to.
I'm going to stop you. No, carry on.
But you get what I mean, because some people
Yeah.
will just ramble, and you've got to, and, you know, with the best of intent. They're not a bad person. They're not a boring person. They just don't know when to stop talking. And so with some people, it's good to have gentle ways to intervene and you know, bring it back on topic or ask a new question. And then with with other people, it's good to just let them speak, but don't let them speak for too long. You know, eventually you should intervene just to keep the pace, just to keep the tone. Because if the interviewer is absent for 10 minutes, that's too long, I think.
You start to feel like the interviewer just is no longer listening.
Exactly. And it's just the person rambling. It's just the person on a monologue, in which case they might as well be on their own channel, you know?
Yeah, and I almost feel part of the job of the interviewer is to feed back in an interested way. And the audience thinks, oh, the person listening to the guest is interested.
Yes.
So it must be an interesting guest.
Exactly.
So this is a live stream worth listening to. And I'm gonna listen to the rest of this either now or later. And
it subconsciously engages the audience because you're interested. So you know, it perks up their ears, as it were. Yeah.
From time to time, I've been feeling that it's right to enter my thoughts into the discussion. So either, oh, have you thought about this? Let me explain my point of view. How pure, like how do you decide when to make it a strictly interview where you're feeding questions just to prompt the guest to carry on extemporaneously, and how much is it when does it a dialogue?
Yeah, I think that will depend on each individual guest. Some of them respond better to a more conversational style, whereas some of them can do with, or they're interesting enough, or their point of view is unique enough that you just want to let them speak. But I think with most people, with most guests, it's right to intervene and give your own perspective, but you should do it briefly. Yes. Because the focus is on the guest. It is ultimately it's about the guest. So I would never go on for 5 minutes about my own perspective on something, because it's not about me. It's for the guest. And my job as the interviewer is to bring out of the guest to help them to articulate their thoughts.
How does it feel being on the other side of the couch?
It's a bit strange. It is a bit odd, yeah.
Which do you think is easier?
I think it's probably easier being the interviewer, because you don't really need to come up with the ideas. You're essentially critiquing and ask the ideas of the guest and asking them for clarification. That's another tip I should have given you. Never be afraid to ask for clarification, because the guest.
What do you mean by clarification?
Well, the guests might not realize that something they've said is inscrutable. So, you know, and also just asking them for clarification actually brings out even more from them.
Yes.
You know, because it forces them to, force sounds bad. But it gives them an opportunity to look at the same topic again and articulate it again. So it's actually a very useful thing.
I watched an interview recently with Susan Wojcicki, and
oh yeah, wonderful woman.
Became apparent that she had vetted the questions in advance, and I was pondering this, because I'd also considered sending questions to my guests in advance, and I thought, well, if they know the questions, they can think about it and they can come up with better answers, and surely the resulting live streams will be more interesting, because instead of having to think off the top of their head, the guests can think in their own, you know, subconsciously process all of the interesting prompts I was going to give. I think the problem, though, is that the audience, like, as humans, we can detect honesty. And if Susan was primed for all of her questions, you knew it. You just every joke, every little anecdote was a little bit a little bit fake.
Oh, that sounds creepy. You've
Yeah.
actually reminded me. Um, this is actually the first time I've been on YouTube uh, for since I got
For
banned. So
yeah.
that's more than a year. I
Wow.
believe this is because I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think this is the first stream I've been
The
on.
triumphant return.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just talking of Susan reminded me of that.
Well, make yourself at home. You know.
Well, I won't get too comfortable.
Yes. Relax. I'll just send you a private message of all the words that you're not allowed to say.
Well, that's the thing. I believe that YouTube is very. I mean, it was bad.
Censorious.
It was bad
Yeah.
when I was like the last 2 years, but as far as I understand, it's actually got worse since then. I mean, people have to use code words. It's like something out of a dystopian sci-fi novel. It's just scary. But I've actually forgotten what the question was that you asked me
Well,
just
I was asking you about whether you
Oh
would feed
yeah,
questions
yeah,
to the.
yeah. Now asking them in advance, I think a good thing is to just give them the general topics, and if you have general topics, then sh- send them to the guest in advance so that they just know. Okay, here's the stuff that I need to be thinking about here
Yes.
to brush up on, and so on. That can be useful. It can be useful, but in terms of keeping the guests happy. What I always do is just ask them, is there anything you definitely don't want to talk about? Or is there
Right.
anything that you definitely don't want me to ask? And usually there aren't, but it's usually something like, that beef that I had with some other content, don't mention that, and etc. That kind of thing, which is just common sense. I mean, I wouldn't bring that up in a stream because it opens a can of worms, that kind of stuff.
I wonder if there's a couple of memorable moments that stick out to you from the history of Millennial. You've already mentioned a few, and this might be asking you too broad of a question, but what maybe just one or two at random things, amusing anecdotes or particularly notable streams.
Well, I think probably the most notable stream is the Mike Isaacson hangout, the Mike Isaacson stream from 2017. He was an Antifa professor who agreed to appear, and we ended up having this conversation. It's just over an hour, I think, and I've actually never watched it. I've never rewatched it, but just because I hardly ever watch my own
I
content,
was going to
and
say that
yeah,
sounds like you sometimes rewatch your streams. I can't. I find
no.
it insufferable to listen to myself.
It's like it feels kind of incestuous. It's like I've got other things to do. Why would I replay this old, this? Yeah, it's weird. But obviously, it's sometimes. Obviously, sometimes I do it. But
Yeah.
it's just partly inevitably you do. But with that one,
But
I've always been
there's probably a
curious.
good value in it, right? If you listened to it with a critical ear and
Yeah,
thought, "Oh, how did that good moment come about?"
yeah,
Because I asked that question earlier.
yeah, yeah. Um, I've always been curious about the Mike Isaacson Hangout because at the time it was such a unique piece of YouTube history, and I knew at the time, I knew when we were doing it, this is just off the wall. Yeah, there's probably never going to be another interaction like this on YouTube. It was very strange, um, very strange, and he I mean, yeah, people can go and see it themselves. It's on Odyssey now. Um, that was a very interesting experience. Um, there have been other millennial streams that I really enjoyed. That like, there was one with Mouthy Buddha in the same year that was very good. I really enjoyed Godfrey Bloom in 2020. And I enjoyed all of Martin Lichtmessy's streams. I think especially 2020 and 2019, they were really good. Um, I mean, each year I make a note of the ones that I've enjoyed the most, and I add them to a list on the website millennial.com, so that people know which ones are my own personal favorites. And it's generally the ones that I feel have been the most interesting or the most fun. So hold on a second. I'll tell you what I wrote for 2021. Academic Agent, The Fergan, The Woodlander. The Woodlander, I intended that one to be about self-sufficiency, but we ended up, that was one where it didn't go to plan because I was a bit too relaxed. And so we just started talking about art college because we both he and I went to art college. But it ended up being a really enjoyable stream. Mr. D was another one from last year. I really enjoyed. The Iconoclast. Yeah. The Iconoclast I really enjoyed. The Morgoth one ended up being a monster stream. I think it was like, hold on a minute. I'll find out how long it actually was. It was, I think 2 years ago, we went for 3 hours. And I thought, okay, it'll be about the same. But it actually ended up being, hold on a second, 4.5 hours. Which was way. I mean, obviously, most millennial streams are like 45 minutes, 45 to 90 minutes. But with Morgoth, obviously, you make an exception, and I think that one went really well. Although we were both completely exhausted by the end of it, but it was really good.
I had Morgoth on yesterday, and chat was extremely indignant that I kept it to an hour. So, I feel a little bit bad about that.
Well, that's a note to make for next year.
We were sort of just hitting our stride as well. So, yes, that is a note for next year.
That's the thing. Like the thing about hitting your stride, it's like with Praise of Folly. It's possible that if we had gone on, it would have got even better. Maybe we had just hit our stride and I cut it just at the moment when it was hitting its stride. Or maybe it had reached its, peak and anything after this would just be waffle. That's a judgment that you've got to make in the moment, unfortunately.
I sometimes wonder whether these streams could be like, once you pop, you can't stop if they were short enough, that you just get enough of a taster, but it doesn't fully satisfy. So you watch another one and just one more, chain them one after the other. I've actually had some people comment that there's just too much content in 1 week, and I've only done I've planned a paltry 25, but that's quite a lot for a listener to find time. So, do you ever wonder whether there's a point of diminishing returns beyond which it's too many guests, too many subjects, they're too long, and you're sort of slaving away streaming for all these hours, and you really haven't.
I did worry about that until it became apparent to me how much people were enjoying it. I think up until maybe 2019, I worried that I was putting too much, because with everything else I do, I put a lot of effort in, and I don't feel that it's generally appreciated how much work I put into my videos, because I do a lot of graphic design, a lot of programming, a lot of video editing, a lot of sound design, and really most of the time I think I do too much of it because it's not going to be appreciated, so therefore I'll get hurt that it's not but really it's kind of barking up the wrong tree. It's my own fault for doing that. It's my own mistake to do that, because my audience generally are not watching it for the artistic qualities of it or whatever. They're watching it for the intellectual content. So that's the stuff that I should concentrate on. And so with a lot of what I do, I feel that I put too much work in. But with Millennial, I don't feel like that at all. I feel like every hour that I like, because it takes up about 3 or 4 months, 3 months. So that's like a quarter of the year is dedicated. It's a quarter of my year every year is spent on Millennial, and that's a lot of work. But I feel like every minute is worth it because people really do enjoy it and appreciate it. And it feels good to be able to do something that means so much to so many people. I mean, especially last year, I was not overwhelmed, but very gratified by how much my efforts were paying off. It felt really good, especially like by the end of it, I just felt like oh, this was just such a success. So the only time when I made a mistake was 2018, when I did far too many streams. Hold on a second, I'll tell you how many it was. And I just put far too much time and energy into it. And it wasn't, let's see, it was 79 streams that year. And it was just, I was shattered by the end of it. And I felt like, no, this hasn't worked. And I'd failed as well because I was exhausted. So the second half of the schedule was just not up to snuff because I was too tired during each interview. So I really felt that was a huge misfire, Millennial 2018. I just felt like it was not what it should have been. But the thing is, nobody else said that. Right? Everyone, people were saying, "No, it's fine. It's fine. You're being too self-critical as usual." But I still feel that was the one year where I made mistakes that I probably needed to make, because thereafter I haven't made the same mistakes. Like another mistake I made that year was pre-recording some of the streams. Not doing them live, and that turned out to be a big mistake because it meant that I was exhausted even before the live schedule actually started.
Yeah.
And also the pre-recorded ones just weren't as popular with people because it wasn't live, so they couldn't interact. It wasn't. So that was a big mistake.
Strange how it actually being live is a tangible thing that people can sense, the electric feeling that anything could happen, something wild could occur, and also that we could take part, we could interact. You say that you're self-critical. Would you describe yourself as, in general, as a perfectionist?
Oh yeah.
Because I've also I've thought of myself as a perfectionist before, and I think this doesn't naturally go with live streaming. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier about how it doesn't. You can't do a perfect live stream. It's just in the nature of it. It is rough and ready.
But for some people, the fact you can't do a perfect live stream doesn't matter. But for me, I struggle with the fact that I want to put out content that every pixel is exactly what I chose, and every second is clipped down to perfection. But it takes a humility to say, oh, people are valuing my time when I spend it here more than there.
Exactly. With Millennial, I would feel bad if I hadn't done enough preparation work. It's like the vast majority of it is the preparation work. And if I had messed up there, then I would feel I'd be furious with myself. I'd be angry and very frustrated with myself for making this mistake, this avoidable mistake. But if I've done enough preparation work, then I know that I've done what I can. And so, there's no guilt.
Someone in chat is saying, ask about your alt channel that has video effect work.
Well, that was called the Woesery. Latterly, I forgot what it was called in the first place. But yeah, it was the Woesery. And that was for just showing bits and bobs of... So, I mean, probably a YouTube channel wasn't the best platform for that. But I'm not sure what would be. But yeah, it was just showing things that I was working on, like rough versions of things. It got shut down. All three of the channels, I had the main one, that one, and MW Live, which I reserved for live streams, and all the AMAs, the weekly AMAs, and all three of them got shut down on the same day, within minutes, I think it was within a 3-minute window, like sequentially, and then my YouTube account itself got deleted. So since then, I literally haven't had a YouTube account. So they really got rid of me. And what they did was, you'll know that the system is 3 strikes and your channel is shut down. Well, what they did with me was they gave 1 strike to each of my channels.
Huh.
And
interesting.
And that was it. And each of the videos, I mean, I think they just chose them at random. They
Wow,
don't. They
that's
they
properly
don't.
malicious,
Oh
like
yeah.
targeting. Yeah.
They don't give a shit, and especially because they did it on the same day as Way of the World. So obviously,
Mm,
it's not a coincidence. I mean, of course it's not, and
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and also 3 strikes in immediate succession that means that you have no chance to clean up your back catalogue, and
Mm,
no chance to react to the first strike, which is
mm.
very typical. I mean, they'll do this a lot. They used to. I mean, and that's another thing. I think that the censorship on YouTube, in a sense, has calmed down because most of the people who, I mean, I think the last one was Mark Collett that got banned. I think in around this time last year, and since then there haven't really been any
All
big
quiet on the
bannings.
Western Front.
Yeah, yeah. I think they've done
Spooky.
everything that they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, and then
For
the people who
now.
remain are scared enough that they're not.
We're all squeaky
It's had a,
clean
yeah,
weaklings.
it's had a chilling effect on
Yes,
everything. So yeah,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, I created I have another channel, Lambda Bible Studies, and I deliberately do these streams on a different channel, Lambda, because I didn't want to risk the channel I've put more time into.
yes.
But now you've told me that getting one channel taken down might actually just knock them all out. So maybe that was a waste of time.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Yours might have been a special case.
I think so. I think they wanted the same with Way of the World. I mean, I think they just wanted
Yeah.
rid of us.
Yeah.
Which you can understand. In a way, it's a compliment.
Yeah, indeed. Now we've talked for 50 out of our allotted 60 minutes without reaching the the topic that I put as the title of the stream: the value of annual festivals. It's ended
Right.
up being a much more meta stream than I expected, but actually I should have predicted that. It was irresistible to just ask all the curious questions that I've got about comparing Lambster and Millennial. But what do you think is the value in having something that is on this yearly cycle?
I think the crux of it is that many of us feel detached from the mainstream. And so its annual festivals, its annual cycle, doesn't mean as much to us as it once would have. Yeah, I think 100 years ago, 50 years ago, Christmas and Easter. I mean, it's Easter right now. These things would have meant a lot more to everyone. Empire Day in Britain, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. These things have become sort of formalities or things that other people do. To especially if you live in a city, like Christmas Day now is just like every other day of the year, especially because the cities are so multicultural. So a lot of the population aren't even taking part in it, which is quite galling. So therefore, if we feel cut off from the mainstream or that the mainstream has lost its soul, it's natural for us to seek something else, something more esoteric, something that does matter to us. So I think it's inevitable that we would create annual events and festivals. So, I mean, obviously there is Millennial. And again, I would emphasize that did not. It all happened quite prosaically. It wasn't planned that, oh, well, there needs to be an annual thing for us. It just happened and it developed and it became. I remember in 2016, the second year, people were asking, are you going to do anything this year? And then in 2017, again, are you going to do Millennial this year? Is there going to be a Millennial? And people were really excited. And it was very heartwarming and encouraging but especially like once I mean, obviously it became a thing, and at different stages, it became clear to me how much this matters to people. So clearly, there is a value to annual festivals because people do value them. So there's Millennial, there's Decameron, which is going on just now. That's Frody's film festival thing that he does around this time. And maybe Lamster will join that pantheon.
Well, I didn't mean to step on poor Frody's film festival. I hadn't added up that they were going to overlap, but maybe that doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think it was accidental. But yeah, these things are. I think it matters to people very much, actually, in a way that I can't quite fathom, and I wouldn't want to articulate, because it feels presumptuous for me to say, "Well, here's what millennial means to people," but it clearly does mean a lot to people. So yeah, I don't.
Brought you here for some navel
Yeah.
gazing. I want to hear you self-aggrandize.
Oh, I can't do that. I'll feel guilty. But what I would say is, I am looking forward to. I mean, I look forward to the preparation. Last year it was a huge amount of preparation, because for various reasons, I wanted there to be an NFT. I wanted there to be an outro for each video. I wanted there to be automated stuff going on Telegram. So there was a lot of additional work last year that I hadn't done before, and the trailer, of course. I'm so proud of the Millennial trailer from last year with the White Stag, and
Are you planning? Are you planning another trailer? Are you going to beat it out? And
I think, well, with that one, I didn't know what I was going to do until, I don't know, maybe a week before I did it. And then, because of all the other work, I ended up doing the trailer very fast. I think I only worked on it for 3 or 4 days. And given, that's given that it is a properly made video, that's not a long time to work on it. But it turned out really well. Now, if I'd had a bit longer to work on it, it would have been a bit more refined. But as it is, I'm very happy with it as it is. And yeah, I'm very proud of the trailer. And the trailer is important because it builds anticipation. Another thing I want to do in future is have more time in between the schedule going up and when the thing actually starts. There have been some years when the schedule has literally gone up the day before this is actually going to begin, which is not optimal, because I think there should be time for people to get excited. There should be time for the anticipation to build. So the trailer is part of that, and the iconography, the graphic design is all part of that. And also that I want each year to have its own aesthetic, to be slightly different, to be slightly unique. And so I'm looking forward to this year, to doing the whole thing again and creating something unique again. Because, as I say, that is essential to it. All of the preparation work is essential to the festival itself actually working out, I think.
I remember. Here's the White Stag.
Yeah,
it's epic. I remember one of the very early things that I did when I started my Bible study channel was I was going to have Bible verses appearing on the screen in this really specific way. So I wrote a piece of software to do that, and I probably spent, dozens and dozens of hours writing this, and way more time on that than I did prepping for the streams. And it's incredible how easily you can self-delude into thinking this is the thing that the audience cares about, and it's not. It's the thing that you, as the creator, care about.
Yeah, there are projects, there are aspects to it that matter to you and which you enjoy most and you want to do well at. But what really matters to the audience is the end result, which is the actual content that is created. And I think it's very difficult to bear that, to really take that on board, and invest your time and energy in the right stuff.
Yes.
But it's something that you have to do, because if you don't do that, then, as I was saying earlier, you end up annoyed or hurt that the audience aren't appreciating the effort that you put into some invisible aspect of it all. But that aspect is invisible to them, so of course they don't notice it. So put most energy into the stuff that will be noticed and appreciated.
Well, Lamster would be nothing without its guests, and it particularly would be nothing without you, because you gave me the idea in the first place, and you're very generous in having supported me with it and coming on the stream. So I'm incredibly grateful. Is there any last thoughts that you'd like to make as we wrap up this stream?
Well, just thank you for inviting me on, and I hope this has been interesting to people. well, we've talked a lot about myself and the creative process. Um, I want to just emphasize that it's in terms of the value of annual festivals. I think a lot of us do feel detached from the mainstream, and so it is essential that we do this. And I think that other people should, if they are capable of doing an annual thing, not necessarily a long running series of things like Millennial or Lambda or Lamster, but if they are capable of contributing something to the calendar, I would encourage them to do so, because we need an alternative. We do need our own culture, if just as something to take refuge in, something to nourish us, because this is a very sickly age that we live in. And we haven't even talked about that, but we don't need to talk about it because everyone knows.
Yes, it's that grim reality in which we abide, but somehow it's comforting to have somebody standing next to you as you gaze into the abyss.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I think that a lot of people feel isolated in their own lives, and indeed that is how Millennial started in the first place. The tagline for the first year was "No reactionary will be alone this Christmas," which was really nice, and that was the goal. It was that we don't want to be alone at Christmas, and we don't want to be alone at any time of the year, really. Yeah, these things are important.
Great. Well, I'm ending each stream by reading a couple of verses, and we're going through the Easter story. So I'm just going to read 3 or 4 verses from one of the Gospels talking about Jesus. So when Pilate saw that he prevailed nothing, but rather that a tumult was arising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this righteous man. See ye to it. And all the peoples answered and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Then released he unto them Barabbas, but Jesus he scourged and delivered to be crucified. And the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed him in purple garment. And they came unto him and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him with their hands.